All right. So for the audience that doesn't know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
All right, George. Yeah, thanks for having me on. So my name's Karl Hughes. I live in Chicago. I own a couple small businesses, both marketing agencies that do super niche things. So I guess we'll talk about that mostly. But besides that, I like retro video games, running, collecting sneakers. I don't know, a few other fun things. I got two kids.
All you entrepreneurs having kids.
Dude,
Yeah.
it's unavoidable. At some point, the peer pressure, everybody around you starts having kids, and you just got to do it.
Well, I was talking to the guy, David, who was also on Starter Story, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't work at all. Like it's really crazy because he has a subscription based service, right?
Yeah.
So that obviously limits how much you really need to work. I'm like, what does your day look like? And he has like two boys, and he's like, he spends all his time with them. I'm like, that's good.
Yeah.
Like that's cute. But
Yeah, man.
um, when you have kids, your life becomes less about you, and it's now about them.
Oh, totally.
I was
Totally.
just
Yeah.
on a
Like,
I was just on a
yeah.
podcast, and he's saying like, look, man, once you have kids, uh, it's your life is like not as much about you. Of course, there are parts that are about you still, but like 90% of it, it's like it becomes about the kids, and like the big decisions become about the kids more than it's about you.
Especially when they're really young too. Like when they're mine are 2 and 5. Like they can't do hardly anything on their own. So like they need you all the time, and like you got to entertain them, you got to feed them, you got to like get them
Yeah.
everywhere. Like, and look, it's super fun and super rewarding. Like I love taking them out and going to museums and parks and like just dicking around with them. But like at the same time, yeah, you give up most of your other like free time hobbies. I think with the caveat, unless you're an entrepreneur who's built yourself enough time freedom that you can just do what
Right.
you want for your day job.
Right. Well, like I said, like I mean, that guy works like probably 2 hours a day, give or take. Like I don't know
Love
the
it.
exact amount. I don't know if I even asked him that, but
Yeah.
it's really like, but it's cool though, like that he gets to now spend like unlimited time with his kids because he made
Yeah.
like $700,000 in like 2 years from just and that was like not linear. It wasn't like he was always making that amount. It was like it grew. So there's parts where he's probably making more and probably less, but I'm saying within that time frame. But God bless him, and I'm happy for you too. Now this gets in the next question that I wanted to ask
Okay.
you. So I was asking you this off the air, and I want you to answer here. So $2.5 million a year is the revenue that your business makes, which Starter
Mhm.
Story puts in their thumbnail and says, this guy's face, he puts your face, $2.5 million a year, and then in tiny letters it puts business, $2.5 million
Right.
a year, business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my follow up to that is how much actually went into your pockets?
Yeah. So this is like a funny thing about it. It's actually what makes being an entrepreneur and talking about things like money kind of complicated and hard. And a reason that I don't go around to like my friends and tell them we did 2.5 or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever $1 million a year last year, because a very small percentage of that actually goes to my pocket. So uh, typically, I'll speak in generalities and then I'll get really specific. So in general, with an agency business, which both my companies are agencies, you can expect from 10 to 20% what's called net margins, which means that's the actual cash flow the business pays off to the owner, most likely. The problem there's also a bunch of other caveats. So again, you could do the quick math. You say 20, let's say I did really well, 20% of 2.5 million, that's $500,000. Now, I'll tell you, I did not, in my specific case, make $500,000 that specific year because I took those net profits and I went and bought another business. There's a whole bunch of expenses that go into that. So rarely does the owner actually take home all of that net profit, even if we have our best year yet. I also reinvested a lot into growth and things like that. So I think I've averaged since starting the business, both of them, I've averaged $120,000 a year in take home, and everything else goes back plugged into the businesses. So it's a strategic question of how much do you want to take from the business? There's probably like a maximum. And then there is like all these things you can kind of choose to reinvest. The other thing too, I bought a second business and it comes with a big loan. Like when you buy a business, you're basically like, it's like buying a house. You put money down. So I, plug a bunch of profit into that down payment. And then I have to pay off that loan over time. I can use the business's profits to pay that loan, but it still comes out of my bottom line. So again, like the true number behind the scenes is I'm making a pretty good salary, but it's nothing like exceptional. And yeah, that top line number looks really, really cool. And it does indicate a little bit like what our size is as far as like employees and how much, value we're driving for clients maybe, but it really doesn't tell you what I'm taking home at the end of the day, which is, the number that ultimately matters at the end of it.
Right. You're not getting $2.5 million a year.
No.
Not
We,
yet.
we got like 10 employees. Like, no, there's a lot of people to pay.
Right. Well, that's an interesting case because when I was talking about David Bressler, who was also on Star Story, which I don't know if I just said this on air or not. But I was just gonna say that with him, in his case, I think he's just one guy. I don't think there's any employees that he has.
Yep.
So as a result of that, when he's making his business is making $700,000 a year, he's just making $700,000 a year. That's him. That's all him. He doesn't have to pay anybody. So you, on the other hand, have like a much more structured business, like where you're not just one dude running this entire service or services.
Right.
But when I'm also talking about how much money goes into your pocket, how much money is there that you choose to do whatever you want with, like, and that includes reinvestment. Like if I were to say how much money is set aside from the business's revenue that's chopped up, of course, amongst all these people as well, but into you in your bank account that you can choose to reinvest, that you can all like the leftover profits for you. How much in total is that?
Yeah, so that's a number called seller's discretionary earnings typically. And it basically is going to include like everything you said. It's the net profit, any money I decide to pay myself, or I decide to reinvest in the business, or I pay taxes with, or whatever else. Because, right, you got like a pretty good chunk of that net profit needs to go towards taxes if you're going to take it out. So our SDE numbers that we target are 15 to 20% SDE. Well, that's probably more like 20% SDE. So what that means is if we did 2 million in revenue, then we want 400,000 in SDE every year. That's pretty typical for an agency at this size. There's different what they call like comparables or comps for different industries. When you have like a small, like an individual course creator business, like let's say you sell a one-time or subscription course and it's one person, there's very little overhead. It's just selling the software or tool or whatever. You have an extremely low cost structure, which means your margins can be huge. Like David, you're talking about 700K in revenue, but he pays nobody. So it's basically 700K in his pocket minus the 40% taxes he's paying probably. But that's one model of doing a business. The downside to that kind of model is obviously it's pretty reliant on him, even if he doesn't have to work much in it actively. Like in order for it to keep going, it's kind of like it's his brainchild, right? There's like some limitations around that. And then the upside is you're taking a lot more home. So every business has its like pros and cons. Like I was able to with Draft.dev, like 2 years ago, I took a whole month off when my second kid was born. I didn't like answer any emails. I was not there for support. I had the team just take care of all that, and they did it, and it's fine. So that's a nice optionality that a lot of really small business owners, like when you don't have employees, it's hard to pull out for a whole month. Even if they only have to work a couple hours a day, it's still like they have to be there. Somebody has to be there keeping the lights on.
So what does a truly productive day to you look like? Like what are you gonna, what is the, you get out of bed and then what, right? Like what is next? That the whole 12-hour span that you're gonna be awake at least. I mean, I don't know how to sleep, but within that span, what are you doing in a day that's ideally productive to you?
Yeah. So I kind of have like a checklist of things that I try to do every day. I'm a pretty regimented person when it comes to like working out. So I get up pretty early and my wife and I take turns. One of us works out in the morning. That, on the days I'm not working out early in the morning, I'm doing it midday or something. I like to have a couple hours of like what I would call focus time every day where I can do deep work on some things, whether it's writing, thinking about some kind of problem or building out long-term plans for things. Then I typically have a lot of meetings. So it's changed a lot. Early days, it was a lot of I was directly doing sales for the businesses and things like that. Now I've actually been working on acquiring more companies. And so most of my day is meeting other entrepreneurs to talk about selling their business and if that's something they're interested in or not. And then, yeah, so I mean, that's it. Then meeting with team members. There's a lot of like check-ins with existing team members and running presentations about what we're doing and strategy, especially when you have two companies. And then the last, like, 3-4 hours of the day, I'm home with the family. I love cooking dinner. I do that every night. I'm like big fan of cooking. And then usually just hanging out with the kids. It's like a lot of I don't know, Legos and running around at the park. Yeah.
All the fun
That's my
stuff.
ideal day. And I get to bed by like 9:30. I wake up at like 5:30, 6. So that's pretty standard. I usually hit about 30 hours of real, what I'd call work a week, where I'm like actually at my desk, and then unknown number of hours where I think about it. I mean, like you can never turn it off. And like, it's like I'm at the gym and I'm working out. I'm still thinking about work stuff. And occasionally I'm checking emails. So like, it just doesn't turn off when you run your own thing.
Wait, so how many hours exactly are you working in?
About 30 hours a week, because I
Okay.
take weekends off and I have about, 6-7 hour days, depending on the day.
Yeah, no, that's well, that's really good. I mean, like for
It's
127.
reasonable. It's reasonable at this stage of my life. Like honestly, there's weeks I'd love to work more, and like I have periods where I do. I love the work. It's hard to turn it off, but like also I want to be involved in like family stuff and taking my kids to school and picking them up and all that.
Right. Well, you still live. I mean, you live a very like in general, in relativity to the amount of money you're making. I would take this deal. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I had to only work 30 hours a week in order to make 120 grand, that's fine. Like, that's
Right,
acceptable.
right, right, right,
Right.
right, right,
I
right.
mean, that's pretty good. Like, that's better than like
Yeah,
99% of people do, because that's like a very
totally agree.
that's like a
It's
that's a very relaxed mindset and like world to live in.
very, very much agree with you. And the other, the flip side to it, and I'm always just very open about this, is like the um it, it's it, it's totally different making 120K as an entrepreneur than as somebody with an employee, like a job, because none of that, my take home, is like really guaranteed. And some years it's going to be twice as much, some years it might be half as much, right? Like that's one of the challenging things, is the ups and downs of it. Yeah, after I recorded that starter, or right around the time I was recording that starter story video, I think like we had a year where our revenue was tracking towards 5 million and we ended up hitting only 2.5 because it just fell off a cliff at one point. And then the next year it was down at like 1.2 or something. And then this year it's back to 1.5 and we've got a second company adding another million. So it's like the shit is all over the place. It's not like you are guaranteed like here's what it's going to be, nice steady like paycheck, and like you won't worry about it. Like I stay up at night worrying about like, am I going to make payroll some months? It's like, and lately it's been good. And so when times are really good, it's awesome. When times are really bad, it is brutal. But you got to be ready to, like, if you can learn to build the mental toughness to weather those ups and downs and know that when things are good, you have to enjoy it. When things are bad, you're going to have to fight through it. It's a super rewarding and fun career path because it's super open-ended. Like, again, I could decide to take a relaxed, period where I only work 20-hour weeks and I, let the team do everything and I take a little less home. Or I could really dive in and take over a couple roles and work 80 hours a week if I wanted, if that was something that was appealing to me, and, net twice as much profit or something to myself. And so it's just, the optionality is really fun.
So, what do you think the biggest lesson is that you've learned? Like the biggest lesson that you've learned in your success, what is it?
So, uh, all success and all people who are like majorly accomplished in something, it starts with this like, it starts with belief, like believing that you can do something. So I'll make a really simple example. A lot of people will say, it'd be cool to be a millionaire. It'd be cool to have a company that paid me, a good living wage and I did whatever I want. But if you don't in your like truly believe that this is something you can do, or you're the kind of person who can do that, you never will take the big actions required to make progress towards actually achieving those results. I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, and that's one of his kind of core tenets. It's all about this big belief. Outsized belief is going to drive you to take big actions that actually allow you to achieve those outsized results that do exceptional things. And if you just can't get that belief in your head, you got to find a way to trick yourself into believing things that you don't believe yet.
In order to become great, we must first admit that we can become great.
Yeah, there you go.
So
that's it.
no, that was something my journalism teacher said, because I'm writing something right now, and it's about, the podcast, how it changed my perception of greatness and fame and all these really nice ideas, and how I'm like, people are so much closer to it than they think. Like, all these really cool things that people want, they're infinitely closer to it than they think they are. And going from that, how do you think success has changed your life?
Man, it's funny you say it. I don't even think of myself as successful. It's like, I don't think I think very few people, because, so here's the problem with ambition that, like, I have this problem, everybody does. If you're ambitious, you always see the next mountain, and you always think success is that next mountain. I'm guilty of this, even though I know objectively that it's not true. Like, I'll hit that next milestone and I'll be like, all right, where's the next one? Because I'm not a sit on the beach and just say, oh, I'm successful, I'm done kind of person. There will always be in my head a next thing to build towards that is success. So I actually think, like, success is like a really hard, the word is kind of loaded. And what I would say is, like, am I enjoying my journey? Absolutely. I'm really loving the journey. And if that's success, great, then call me successful. But I also feel like I'm not finished yet either. And success to some people implies like I'm finished. And I don't feel like, I mean, I'm obviously I'm young. I've got a long way to go here. Like, I'm going to keep doing this for two, 3 more decades at least. So yeah, I don't know. How has it changed? Like, so anyway, getting to a point where I can look at what I've done and be happy that even if the company just maintained what it was, or even if I had to do something crazy, like go back and get a day job, went bankrupt and got a day job, I would feel very accomplished and have, like, I've done something that a lot of people haven't done. I'd be happy with myself. And I think getting to that point, maybe that's success too. All that is kind of like wrapped up in that word success. So I don't know how to answer your question about, like, has it changed me? I just think I've changed my perception of what success is. And I now think of it as more of like being on a journey that's fun is the goal.
I agree. I think most people's perception of success, or at least mine, is the capacity to live as freely as you can, or at least as freely as you desire, and having the ability to basically do anything you want. Like, it's the ability to do that, right?
Yeah.
So most people don't have. I mean, depends on what you want is, because some people want to become. All they want is money, and they think that money is like everything. They're all there is, and they just can't stop thinking about money. I mean, everybody gets to that point eventually. I think having an obsessive mentality where it's like, where's the next, where's the next, where's the next? I think that's kind of par for the course. Remember Chris Williamson? He did an interview with Cameron Haynes, or he's done a few, and he's like, look, when you get all these people that are like, oh, I wish I could be like you, who's running like 20 miles a day, like, because he runs a marathon every single day, this guy that he interviewed, and he's like, but what most people don't realize is you have a mentality now where 20 miles is never enough. Like, you have to run 20 miles. Otherwise, like, you actually can't sit still throughout the day. Like, there's a problem with like you don't enjoy yourself. So I think people put the blinders up far too often, and they don't stop to smell the roses, especially when they have the ability to.
Yep.
I think that's one. And I think just having the ability and the freedom to chase a passion or a talent that you have is a very fulfilling experience. I think that's like that, and having kids are the most fulfilling things a person can do. I agree. Like,
Yeah.
I want to have kids one day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've joked. I'm like, I'm gonna have 10 kids and name them all George. Like, I've made that joke before, where it's like, all right, George.
I think
one,
George Foreman did that.
Yeah, no, he did.
Honest.
It was like George 1, George 2, George 3. I mean, if I have a girl,
Those poor kids.
People always say to me, like, George, what if you have a girl? And I'm like, Georgina, Georgia,
Right.
work from there.
Oh, Lord.
So going from this is a somewhat perfect question. I think I just change the wording. You already have a very good path of money and income and success, and success. Like, you have something most people don't have, that is a very comforting thing to have. So my question is, why not do something like sell the company and, like, just move on and then just sit on a beach all day, sleep however long you want, work out whenever you want, spend all the time in the world you want with your kids. Why keep going, at least in this way?
Yeah. I actually two and a half years ago kind of felt that. And I was actually like my first company, Draft.dev, had been growing. It was like a hot market. I could have sold it. And I started to look into that. And what I realized was like, I am not I don't like sitting on the beach. I don't like not having something that makes me feel like I'm doing something productive. So if I had sold it, I would have basically gone back to starting something else, or I would have gone and tried to do another thing that would or I mean I would be work every day anyway. And so what I figured was like, well, instead of trying to sell it and like find myself again, why not just double down on what I have? Like I have one agency that does fairly well, and I've learned a lot in doing that. What if I bought a second one? And then I was like, what if I buy 10 in the next 10 years? And what if I can grow all of them to $100 million in total revenue? That's the goal now. So I basically was like, instead of like worrying about selling it and just laying back, I don't want to do that. It's not going to be exciting. I want to have a really big milestone that is like a 10-year plan. I may get a third of the way there. Who cares, right? Like it doesn't really matter. But like the point is, have you ever read The Alchemist? It's good. So it's an allegory for like chasing ambitious things. He calls it a personal legend. But the idea that it's a lot of the same stuff we're talking about here, where the idea is if you are out there building towards some big goal, that's the reward. The journey is the reward. It's not about the big goal. And realizing that has made me less afraid of setting really big goals that I have no idea how I'm going to reach, because the journey is the fun part. Who cares if I hit the goal or not? I don't care. Honestly, I mean, like I care as in like I want to have something I'm pointing toward and making a little bit of progress towards every day. But at the end of the day, like I love every step in it. And as long as I'm liking the steps, I don't really care that the goal's, 10 feet away or 100 feet away, 1,000 feet away. I feel like I'm having a very rewarding and fun time. So that's the way I look at it now. But that took a year of kind of like going through coaching, soul searching in a way, and just thinking about the scenarios of what would happen if I sold this company or whatever. And maybe I'll be there in a couple of years. I'll decide like, yeah, I'm not ready to I don't want to do this anymore. I do want to sit on a beach, or more likely it would be, I want to do something like different and creative, like write a book, or I've always wanted to get good enough at an instrument that I could like record an album. That would be cool. Again, like not something I'm in a hurry to do, but I could see doing that.
Well, it's what everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to have the ability to, because nobody wants to. I mean, at least not me. I don't truly want to retire, where it's like I'm literally doing
Right.
My idea of like retirement would be like, I wake up, I probably would work out, probably hang out with my friends, probably,
Yeah.
I like, this is like if I was like right now, probably move to Florida too, because I like the beach there. As I was telling you before.
But you want time freedom. Like that's what you really want. You don't
Yeah.
want like nothing to do. Yeah.
Right. I want freedom to do what I love. Like that's it. Like I would probably still do this. Like there's no reason why I wouldn't do this. I probably read books more often. And I just started getting back into books, so I appreciate the recommendation. Do you read like a lot?
Yeah, I used to read a lot more, and then having kids, I read a lot less, but it's at least a couple books a month. I didn't do it till after college, though. I hated reading in high school. I only read Spark Notes until college. Like after college, I think I was like the worst about I was terrible about it. My parents hated, they were always on me about this, and I was like, yeah, I don't have time to read stuff.
Well, so my justification for why I hated reading, and I mean I'm still in high school, so
Right.
like my justification for why I hated reading for so long, I mean, yes, it was because of school, but my rationale, like my thought process would be like, why am I going to read a book when I have online summaries that explain all the knowledge to me? It's basically like and it is gonna be like a really gross way to put it, but it'd be kind of like asking somebody, why are you going to chew a steak when you could have somebody chew it for you and spit it into your mouth? You could say that, but you're not like enjoying what the steak is. Like, yeah, you could just get the nutritional value that way, like if you want to make your life really boring. But the
Right.
idea is that you're supposed to read and chew and then digest the book. Like it
Yeah.
provides so much more. And I'm so glad I started reading because
Yeah.
it's given me like so many more new like
And
understandings and
yeah. And
yeah.
like some books are not worth reading. Like some books, I just want the summary. Like that's all I need. Like honestly, a lot of business books, man, and some of them are good, but like there's a lot of them that could have been a blog post and the publishers just make them do 250 words, or 250 pages, which I think is kind of stupid. But that said, like there are certainly some business books where they keep it concise and to the point and they kind of like tighten it up, or they actually do have enough to say that it's worth the 250 pages. But yeah, there's a lot of books that aren't worth reading.
Well, the one there's so many good books out there, and it's like such a
Sure.
shame people like just don't like reading. Like I hate to
Yeah.
sound like that guy, like, oh, why don't people read more books? Like because I was that person too. So I get why.
Yeah.
Like you have to sit down and you have to really focus on something. It's not like you can it's not like you're like even listening to an audiobook is not the same, right? Because I've
Mhm.
learned that, right? Yes, you do get knowledge out of listening to an audiobook. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying if you're a super busy person you can't listen to an audiobook. There's a lot of value in it. However, I'd say like listening to an audiobook is like 60% as effective as just reading the thing. And when you're reading, it's much harder to like truly not pay attention, like especially when it's something in front of you. Um, so moving from that and moving from books, actually, what's a book recommendation for the audience? Let me ask you that.
Who would you say is your audience? I imagine
Um,
like
young people. Let's just say
just
like
young people.
young
Yeah.
adults. I mean, I'm not an adult yet. I'm about to be in like a few months, but
Yeah.
yeah. So what? Who? Anybody listening? Anybody listening? Any book
Yeah.
recommendations? Anybody listening?
There's a lot that helped me on this path of like becoming an entrepreneur and like doing ambitious things. So one that I read right when I started my first business was called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. So she's the writer of Eat, Pray, Love. I've never read that book, but it's a bestseller. And the important part about her book Big Magic is it's a autobiographical book about how she became a writer and how she became a best-selling writer. And so the truth is you see the best-selling title, right? You assume she must be just like, so gifted, yada yada, whatever. She worked for 20 years writing in complete obscurity with nobody reading anything she wrote, right? I mean, that's like the typical story for a lot of writers and creatives and entrepreneurs. They spend decades learning something, doing it over and over in obscurity where no one knows about them, and then all of a sudden they have one hit and everybody defines them by that one hit. So really interesting to look at success before success happens, when you're like in that path, because it just shows you the grind. There's another really similar book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art, which is basically the same idea, but Stephen Pressfield's a little more wacko. So if you want to go the further route, I'd go to him. But that book is a really life-changing kind of way for me to look at it. She also talks, Elizabeth Gilbert in the Big Magic, talks a lot about fear and living with the fear that creatives have of failure, of not being ever recognized, of not writing something that's good enough. And this holds so many people back. I mean, one thing that, again, this goes back to like what would help young people. A lot of my friends in high school and college continued going to more and more college because they were so afraid to ever actually put their work out into the real world. I have so many friends that went and got master's degrees and multiple master's degrees because they were just afraid they weren't good enough, smart enough, and didn't have the skills to succeed in the real world. And it's like you just end up being like overqualified for anything on paper, but underqualified for anything in experience level. And like, so anyway, that's one. That I already mentioned, The Alchemist. I love that one. I love Awaken the Giant Within, Tony Robbins' book, and talks a lot about modeling and some of this other stuff we were talking about with belief. I guess that's probably a good starting point for people that are earlier on in their careers. Another one I read too, though, that I'll throw in there is 4 Hour Work Week, which some of the tactical stuff, the second half of the book probably doesn't hold up anymore. It's like kind of dated, but the first half of the book is all about separating your work and input from the amount of money you take home. I think it goes back to your example of David's earlier when we were talking, how he can work a couple hours a day and make, say it's 350K a year on average. Like, there are certainly ways to design your life to do that. And he's a good example of that. There, Tim Ferriss, who wrote The 4 Hour Workweek, has great examples of that. But you have to like free yourself from the conventional way of thinking of like, I must get a job that pays me to sit in this seat for 40 hours a week and gives me $100,000 in exchange for that. And instead start to look at yourself and like the value you can deliver to other people and how you can do that in fewer hours rather than just 40 hours. And if you can get your mind thinking that way early on, it's going to completely change your career path and how you prioritize things.
So, what do you think your biggest regret is?
Like, it's so hard to say that this is a regret, but one thing I think about sometimes is, man, if I could have figured out how to go full time on my own business earlier, I would be a few years ahead of where I am now. Not that I'm like, I feel like behind or anything like that. I mean, there aren't that many 35-year-olds with multi-million-dollar companies, so I guess I'm doing okay. But I technically had the knowledge to do what I'm doing today on paper 10 years earlier. Like, I could have done this straight out of college. I don't think I would have been like, I need a certain education. But I think I just need the confidence to go out and do it and like say, I'm going to do this thing. So yeah, maybe that, but honestly, I don't regret it. It's just like, that's just the path that my life took. It doesn't feel like something I sit and mull on.
So, what do you have as advice for entrepreneurs?
Um, Man, I don't know. I think for me, the biggest thing was learning, like accepting and learning to sell, accepting that I was going to have to sell things and then learning to sell was really helpful. I was a software engineer before this. So like I studied mechanical engineering, I got into coding, and I did software engineering for 10 years before I started my own business. Um, and I tried a lot of little side projects, and all of them I just attempted to avoid having to sell anything because I didn't think I was good at it. And then I finally just accepted that I was going to need to do sales. And I sort of committed myself to spending 50% of my time every week on sales when I started Draft.dev, and it worked. If I just sort of like buckled down and done that earlier on any of the other projects, I probably would have gotten one of them off the ground too. So learning that like facing the fact that entrepreneurship basically is sales is like a really good lesson to just internalize if you can.
What advice do you have for young people?
Oh man, do like, don't ever give up on the youthful optimism. Man, it's so sad when like I hear people. Yes, there's some point in your like mid 20s where like it's like for most people it's like right around end of college or a couple years after college, and they just stop talking about what their dreams for their life, and they're more like, here's how I get to the next career promotion, and that's how they start to build their whole path off of like 2 years I'll be a middle manager, in 2 years I'll be a director, in 2 years I'll be a vice president. And like, that's so fucking sad to me. Like, what do you really like? Go zoom back. If you could do anything, what could it be? Like, don't lose that. Like, keep trying to do big things, like big, exciting, crazy things.
So, what do you think the biggest lesson is that you've learned having lived the life that you've led?
The Yeah, again, I think that like you will go as far as you believe you can go is one of the biggest lessons for me so far. And yeah, we've already said that. I think that's just like something that if I had been able to internalize that earlier, I would have certainly like started my own like a real company earlier. I would have gone self-employed full-time earlier. Who knows? But um that's been one of my big ones. And then the other one is related to the whole like um money thing, because again, you can look at me from the outside and be like, yeah, you're doing well financially, but like there's always another ladder in that, or another rung in that ladder. Like I have friends who make twice as much as me. I have friends who make 5 times as much as me. And like, there's things that they have that I internally sometimes think like, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could buy that car. I wish I could live in that kind of house. But I I really try to remember and surround myself with people who are more grounded, just because I know that's a trap. It's just a treadmill. None of them are happier or any different fundamentally than me. It's just a matter of like, at some point when you get to a certain level, like you're past subsistence, money is just like icing on a cake. You don't have to have 6 feet of it. You just need a little layer.
Yeah, that's always been my position. So, and I think with that, I think that's a good place to end off.
Yeah, man.
Any final words to the audience?
No, I appreciate you having me on, George. This is fun. I also applaud you for your doing something cool and different. Not many high schoolers have a podcast where they're reaching out to business owners and all sorts of people, like people who've been in prison. Like, I love your past episodes. This is really cool.
Thank you. Which ones have you seen? Actually, let's talk about this after the show.
We'll talk about it after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't remember. I don't want to struggle.
All right. In 3, 2, 1.